What if I told you the biggest mistake women over 40 make with younger men has nothing to do with age and everything to do with how they see themselves? Because the truth is, it's not your years that push him away, it's the quiet ways you forget your own worth trying to keep him close. When a woman over 40 dates a younger man, it's natural for her to lean into her nurturing instincts, especially if she has spent years in roles where caretaking came first, whether as a mother, a leader, or simply someone who's emotionally mature. But this instinct, when unchecked, can subtly change the entire dynamic of the relationship without her even realizing it. He starts giving advice he didn't ask for, solving problems he never presented, or doing things for him that he's perfectly capable of doing himself. What starts as kindness quickly begins to feel like parenting, and that's where the chemistry begins to shift. Attraction in romantic relationships thrives on polarity and balance. When two people meet each other as equals, with space for mystery, desire, and respect, the moment he starts feeling like he's being taken care of in the way a child is, rather than being seen and admired as a man, that polarity collapses. She may think she's being helpful, supportive, or loving, but what he experiences is a slow erosion of romantic tension. He doesn't want another mother, he wants a partner. He's not looking to be saved or guided, he wants to feel like a man who is enough just as he is. And here's the tricky part, it often comes from a good place. A woman who has lived, learned, and built herself wants to share that wisdom, but the key is restraint. Unless he explicitly asks for support or guidance, offering it too freely can send a subtle message that she doesn't trust his judgment, that he's not capable on his own, or that she's positioning herself above him. And even if he doesn't say it, he'll start to feel it. The relationship then becomes unbalanced, not because of the age gap, but because of the dynamic the age gap triggered. The most powerful relationships between older women and younger men happen when the woman stays in her power without trying to control his path. She doesn't take on the emotional labor of shaping him into someone he's not ready to be. She holds space, she inspires, she invites, but she doesn't parent. Because once that line is crossed, it's almost impossible to come back to a place of deep romantic attraction. When a woman over 40 starts dating a younger man, there can be a quiet temptation to overcompensate for the age difference by leaning into what she believes she has more of: experience, stability, or even financial resources. It may begin subtly, offering to pick up the bill more often, gifting things he wouldn't afford on his own, or guiding him through life decisions with the confidence she's earned over the years. But while this might come from a place of generosity or a desire to show value, it can inadvertently create an unspoken imbalance in the relationship. She starts leading, providing, and directing, while he unconsciously begins to lean back, receive, and possibly even feel indebted. The danger here isn't just that she becomes the giver, it's that this dynamic slowly chips away at mutual attraction and emotional equality. A romantic relationship thrives when both partners feel valued not just for what they give, but for who they are. When one person starts giving from a place of wanting to be seen as indispensable or irreplaceable, it introduces a quiet insecurity into the dynamic. She may not say it out loud, but there's often a hidden fear underneath. If I don't bring all this to the table, will he still want me? And once that question seeps in, her actions start being driven not by connection, but by anxiety. Meanwhile, he might initially appreciate the attention and the perks, but over time, he may feel either controlled or emotionally distant from someone who is doing so much that he can't keep up, or doesn't feel needed. It's not about the gifts or guidance, it's about the energy behind them. Is she giving to share joy and connection, or is she giving to prove her worth? Younger men who are drawn to older women often admire their self-possession, not their willingness to oversunk. They're not seeking a mentor or someone to solve life for them, but someone who stands confidently beside them without trying to constantly prove her place. The moment she starts using her experience or resources as a way to secure the relationship, she unknowingly undermines the very qualities that made her attractive in the first place. Her emotional independence, her sense of self, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing she doesn't need to buy or earn love. When a woman over 40 enters a relationship with a younger man, one of the most common traps she can fall into is the subtle habit of lowering her standards just to keep the connection alive, especially if she fears that being too firm, too opinionated, or too clear about what she wants might scare him away. She may begin to downplay her needs, laugh off behaviors she'd never tolerate in someone her own age, or convince herself that certain things aren't a big deal, when deep down, they really are. This usually comes from a fear of being seen as too much or too demanding in a relationship where the age gap already feels like a silent hurdle. The danger here is that, in trying to preserve the relationship, she starts to disappear in it. Her voice becomes quieter, her expectations more flexible, and her boundaries more negotiable, not because they've genuinely changed, but because she's trying to appear more accommodating. Over time, she may find herself putting up with immaturity, inconsistency, or even disrespect. Things she would have immediately walked away from at another point in her life. And while this might keep the relationship afloat for a while, it creates an underlying tension that both people can feel. He may not be aware of what's happening, but he'll start to sense that she's not being fully honest with herself or with him. What initially drew him in, her strength, clarity, and sense of self, gets slowly replaced with someone who seems overly eager to please. And once that shift happens, the dynamic becomes less about mutual respect and more about quiet self-sacrifice. The irony is that by softening her standards to seem more appealing, she actually loses the very allure that makes her magnetic. A woman who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to walk away if it's not met is deeply attractive, especially to a younger man who's looking for something real. But when she starts making exceptions she wouldn't have made before, or tolerating behavior that drains her, she not only loses her own sense of fulfillment, she trains him to meet her at a lower level. Over time, resentment builds, not just toward him but toward herself, because deep down she knows she's betraying her truth. The most powerful position she can hold in any relationship, especially with a younger man, is to remain rooted in who she is, even if that means risking the loss of someone who isn't ready to rise to meet her there. When a woman over 40 begins dating a younger man, it can be tempting to step in and try to help him get his life together, especially if she sees potential in him that he hasn't yet realized. Her instincts, shaped by years of experience and emotional maturity, may lead her to believe she's being supportive by offering solutions, encouraging him to be more ambitious, or guiding him through personal challenges. But while her intentions may be loving and well-meaning, this often creates an unintended consequence. She starts to take on the role of the fixer. The moment she begins trying to shape his choices, improve his habits, or elevate his lifestyle, the romantic dynamic starts to shift. It no longer feels like a partnership. It becomes a quiet project, where she assumes the position of someone who knows better, while he becomes someone who isn't enough yet. Even if he appreciates her guidance, over time he may start to feel diminished, as though he's constantly being evaluated or subtly corrected. He might begin to question his own instincts, doubt his decisions, or pull away, not because he doesn't value her, but because he feels like he's being managed rather than loved as he is. And for her, the emotional labor becomes exhausting. What began as love and investment turns into frustration and disappointment when he doesn't change fast enough or take her advice seriously. She may feel unappreciated, or worse, start to see him as a burden rather than a partner. This cycle can become a breeding ground for resentment both ways. He resents feeling controlled, she resents having to constantly lead. But what's often missed in this dynamic is that true connection doesn't require fixing. It requires presence, acceptance, and mutual respect. A younger man is on his own journey, and part of what can make the relationship beautiful is that he gets to grow alongside someone who trusts him to figure it out, rather than someone who tries to fast-track his evolution. When a woman allows him to be where he is without rushing to upgrade his life, she gives him space to rise on his own terms, and that space is powerful. It invites him to step into his own maturity, to show up, not because he was pushed, but because he chose to. And for her, that kind of growth is far more rewarding than anything she could have engineered. It's easy to confuse control with care, especially when you've lived long enough to know better. But in love, the deepest kind of support often comes not from fixing someone's path, but from walking beside them while they find their own. When a woman over 40 starts seeing a younger man, it's easy to assume that just because there's chemistry, shared interests, or an emotional connection, they're both operating on the same timeline, especially when it comes to commitment, family planning, or long-term vision. But often, these timelines are not aligned, and the assumption that they are can quietly sabotage the relationship. A woman in her 40s may be in a phase of life where clarity is non-negotiable. She knows what she wants, doesn't have the luxury of wasting time, and is likely seeking something emotionally stable and future-oriented. Meanwhile, a younger man may still be exploring, figuring out his identity, or trying to understand what commitment really looks like for him. If she begins projecting her urgency onto him without giving him the chance to arrive there himself, it creates silent pressure he may not know how to express or manage. He might begin to feel like the relationship is a countdown he didn't sign up for, even if he genuinely cares. She, on the other hand, may misinterpret his slower pace as emotional unavailability, leading her to push harder or demand clarity before he's ready. This tug of war causes both sides to lose sight of what brought them together in the first place. The connection, which started as something light, exciting, and genuine, gets buried under expectations, timelines, and unspoken fears. She may begin to feel anxious, asking herself if she's wasting her time, while he may feel increasingly suffocated, unsure how to meet her expectations without compromising his own pace of growth. What's even more complex is that neither person is necessarily wrong. They're just living at different stages of life with different emotional clocks. And when those differences aren't acknowledged or discussed with honesty and compassion, they can cause emotional damage that could have been avoided. The truth is, attraction doesn't guarantee compatibility in timing. A younger man might be drawn to her confidence, stability, and self-awareness, but that doesn't automatically mean he's ready to match her level of certainty or long-term readiness. And if she forces alignment before it's naturally there, she risks building a relationship on pressure rather than partnership. What she must realize is that honoring her own pace is essential, but doing so doesn't require him to move faster than he's ready for. Instead, it requires honest conversations, clear boundaries, and the courage to walk away if his path doesn't align with hers. That self-respect is what keeps her from compromising the future she truly wants. And ironically, when she stands firm in her timeline without forcing him to conform, she creates the very space that allows him to decide whether he's willing and ready to meet her there. When a woman over 40 dates a younger man, one of the most common mistakes she can make is forgetting her own power in the process, often trying to shrink herself to fit into his world rather than standing firmly in her own. She may begin to question whether her age is a disadvantage, especially in a society that places such high value on youth and beauty, and this doubt can slowly influence how she shows up in the relationship. She might start trying to dress younger, pretend to like things she doesn't enjoy, or stay quiet on topics where she would normally speak with confidence, all in an effort to appear more desirable or relatable to someone in a different stage of life. This kind of performance is subtle at first, but over time it chips away at her authenticity, creating a version of herself that isn't fully true. And even if he doesn't say anything, he can feel the difference. Attraction doesn't just come from how someone looks. It comes from how someone carries themselves, how they speak, how they lead with certainty, and how comfortable they are in their own skin. When she forgets that, when she begins to act like her age is something to hide rather than something to be proud of, she diminishes the very qualities that made her compelling in the first place. A woman over 40 carries a kind of depth, grace, and presence that a younger woman simply hasn't had the years to develop, and it's that emotional richness that often draws younger men in. But the moment she trades that depth for a version of herself that tries to compete with youth, she stops being her most powerful self and starts being a watered-down version of what she thinks he wants. In doing so, she not only loses connection with him, but she also loses connection with herself. The truth is, the most magnetic women are the ones who don't apologize for where they are in life. They don't try to erase their lines, their stories, or their strength. They wear their experience like a crown, not a costume. And ironically, when a younger man meets a woman who embraces her age without hesitation, he's far more likely to respect her, be drawn to her, and even aspire to match her level of self-possession. Because what most younger men truly crave, whether they admit it or not, is someone who challenges them to rise, not someone who bends to meet them where they are. By owning her age, her values, and her voice, a woman becomes unforgettable not because she tried to impress him, but because she never needed to. The truth is, dating a younger man when you're over 40 isn't about adjusting who you are to fit into his world. It's about standing firm in the power you've earned through your life, your lessons, and your experiences. The moment you start mothering him, overcompensating, dimming your standards, fixing his life, assuming his timeline, or hiding your age, you chip away at the very essence that makes you magnetic. A real connection doesn't require shrinking. It requires showing up fully as yourself, without apology. When you honor your worth, hold your standards, and stay rooted in your identity, you don't just attract someone, you inspire them to rise. Because love isn't about being younger, cooler, or easier. It's about being real, being seen, and being deeply respected for exactly who you are.